Here.
Alan Kravitz,
Here.
Michael Rossi, Edward Alberino,
Here.
Pamela Fritz, Christine Goupil, Michael Knudsen,
Here.
John Main,
Here.
James Staunton,
Here.
Maurice Kirk Carr,
Present.
Timothy Guerra,
Here.
Mark Rapuano.
Present. Okay, we have a full complement of regular members. Would the secretary please read the legal notice?
Okay. Legal notice of public hearing July 7th, 2014, 7 p.m. in the Green Room. Clinton Planning and Zoning Commission will hold a public hearing on Monday, July 7th, 2014 at 7 p.m. in the Green Room of the Andrews Memorial Town Hall, 54 East Main Street, Clinton, Connecticut, to consider the following. 1, SC 14043, 1 and 40 Knollwood Drive, Global Companies, LLC, Wholesale Propane Distribution Facility, map 22, block 10, lot 17, zone I-1, public hearing continued from June 2nd, 2014. Item 2, SC 14-073 and sub 292, Sterlingshire Woods, Long Hill Road, Wanda M. Leakey, 3-lot subdivision with 1 rear lot, map 75, block 52, lots 5-3 and 6, zone R60 and R80. Item 3, SE 14-095, 31 Soul Point Road, Charlene Kiesler, legalized accessory apartment, map 80, block 72, lot 14, zone R10. Item 4, AR 14-030, amendment to the zoning regulations and zone map, section 3, definition, section 20, interchange development zone, IDZ, section 23, districts, section 24.2, non-residential schedule of uses, section 25.1, non-residential lot requirements, standards, and zone map. At said hearing, all persons will have the right to be heard and written communications received. The applications and accompanying maps are available for public inspection from the Land Use Office of the Andrews Memorial Town Hall, and the text and map of the amendment is also available in the town clerk's office. Clinton Planning and Zoning Commission and someone related as chairman. This was emailed to the Harvard News to appear 2 times, Thursday, June 26, 2014, and Thursday, July 3rd, 2014.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Before I begin and start with item number 1 of the agenda, I want to set out the ground rules and explain to those of you who were not here the last time how this works. This is obviously a public hearing. That means the public gets to participate. However, there's a certain procedure that we need to follow. And as I did the last time, I'm going to ask you all to be courteous, concise, if you can be. And by that, I simply mean that we don't want to have a repetition of what we heard the last time. You're going to hear a lot of new information tonight, I believe. There's new correspondence, which I will call the secretary to outline for us. We're not going to read every single item because we'll be here till tomorrow, but we will let you know what is new. Then we will pick up where we left off the last time, which is a rebuttal from the applicant. The applicant has represented to us at the last hearing that they will rebut or answer any of the questions that were raised by either the public or the commission at the last hearing. I think in the interest of continuity and full understanding, we're going to pick up from there. Once that's concluded, I am going to open it up again to the public. We'll begin with testimony in favor of the application. Then we will have testimony in opposition to the application, general questions, and then the commissioners are going to finally get a word in edgewise. And that's rather important because it is we as a commission that need to make a decision based upon all the evidence gathered. I ask for your patience, for your indulgence, and again, for your courtesy. we're here to learn as much as we can before the decision is ultimately made. So let's not be repetitive. I don't want to go back and have the same individuals that might be here tonight that were here the last time say exactly the same thing all over again. I think those people can speak again, and I will allow it, but I would want them to limit themselves to the new information, not a rehash of what was already discussed. As I said, we want to learn all we can. We've already learned plenty, and we heard from many of you, I'm sure. We don't need to hear again. There's new people here tonight, I'm quite certain of that, and they should be allowed an opportunity to also speak. So having said that, item number 1 on the agenda tonight is SC 14043, 140 Knollwood Drive, Global Companies LLC, the wholesale propane distribution facility. Mr. Secretary, is there any new correspondence?
Yes, sir.
Would you just outline it?
Okay, we have correspondence received through July 7, 2014. We have a June 9, 2014 letter from Bruce Farmer, a June 19, 2014 plume dispersion modeling offsite consequence analysis from Fuss and O'Neill, a June 27, 14 memo from John Laskowski, CME Associates Incorporated, a July 2nd, 2014 response by Global Companies LLC to brief in opposition from the Hammonasset Environmental Trust, the June 19, 2014 received July 2nd, 2014 letter from Thomas F. Berlin, the June 30th, 2014 received July 2nd, 2014 letter from Lawrence L. Hannafin Consulting, an undated letter received July 2nd, 2014 from Pamela Garrity, I'm screwing up names, I'm sorry, Camadeus, the realtor, July 2nd, 2014 letter from Ron Bolson, photographs submitted July 3rd, 2014 by Alex Wetmore of Hammonasset Environmental Trust, an undated letter received July 3rd, 2014 from Doris Fallon, July 2nd, 2014 supplemental brief in opposition, July 3rd, 2014 response to supplemental brief in opposition by Global Companies LLC, July 3rd, 2014 letter from Kenneth Slater, Hallahorn and Sage LLP, July 3rd, 2014 memorandum from Diane Whitney, Pullman and Comley, an undated letter received July 7, 2014 from Ron Bollinson, neighbor's response to Global's late filing, email from Kenneth R. Ainsworth with attachment, photographs submitted July 7, 2014 from Bounce Fund Center, traffic impact study prepared for Global Partners LP, July 7, 2014 response to June 19, 2014 report by Fuss and O'Neill by Richard Lavengood, and a petition submitted July 2nd, 2014 with 260 signatures and 203 online signatures.
Thank you. A few of those documents were received by the commission just a few minutes ago, so we haven't had a chance to go through them ourselves. They are all available in the land use office if anyone wants to inspect them. You're free to do that at any point during business hours, obviously. Shouldn't say at any point because we're on weekends. I'll try to speak out and be loud enough for everybody in the back to hear me. Just let me know if you don't hear me. I'll do my best. Okay, obviously we have an applicant here. Would the attorney for the applicant please pick up from where we left off? I think you probably want to rebut.
Mr. Chairman, we have the signature page for everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, and members of the public. I'm Diane Whitney.
Louder.
I'm Diane Whitney from Pullman and Conley, and I represent Global Companies LLC. When the list of documents was just read off, I believe that the commission, have two documents from Mr. Lavengood. One entitled Thoughts on the Proposed Propane Facility at 140 Knollwood, and the second, which was referenced tonight, about the Cameo air modeling report. So I don't know that both of them were mentioned tonight, but you should have two in your records. Also tonight, we have distributed to you a few things. Number one is resumes of Doug Fountain and Adam Lamartine, two members of our team who were not here last time but are here tonight because there may be questions that they are better able to answer. And with those two resumes, there are two maps showing the distance from the proposed tanks to the closest residences in Madison and in Clinton, both of which are 1,180 feet from tank to residence. I would suggest during your considerations tonight that you might ask the expert for the interveners to submit his educational credentials also, as we have done for all of our team. My intention tonight, as you suggested, is to briefly go over some of the questions that were asked last time and to give our answers. We have given them all in writing, but I understand that everyone who's here hasn't seen that. So I will quickly run through some of those answers. You have a long safety explanation in our July 3rd memo. You will hear tonight a lot about propane explosions. Please note that the explosions you hear about do not occur at bulk storage facilities. They are at smaller, less highly regulated uses, such as the propane tank in the food service truck that blew up last week in Philadelphia. Those are far different facilities from what we are talking about for Clinton. They are not as highly regulated. They are not controlled by people trained to control them safely. And they are the propane accidents that you tend to hear about. A question was raised last time about insurance and whether residents would have any difficulty insuring their property or if their rates would go up. That was answered by the town planner, John Guzkowski, with information from the state insurance department, who said that no, in fact, that would not happen. I'm going very quickly to try and answer all the questions and give other people a chance to talk, but please stop me at any time if you need more information. The facility will be for the wholesale distribution of propane only. No other substances are proposed for the site, no retail use is proposed, and no expansion is planned. If any of those changes are sought in the future, it would require a new application to this commission. But there is no plan for any of those changes at this time. Concerns have been expressed about the visibility of the tanks from neighboring property. Those concerns should be answered in large part by the photographs that are attached to one of the memos that you have all received. Note that the photos were taken in March when there were no leaves on the trees, so there would be maximum visibility. Despite that, the most that can be seen is the existing building currently on the site, and that is far in the distance. The only view of the tanks will be from the rail cars going by on the site. There is a landscaping plan attached to the July 3rd memo that shows an already existing buffer of more than 50 feet on every perimeter of the property except along the rail line, which obviously a buffer there would defeat the purpose of having the rail line. However, there is such a buffer on the other side of the rail line, so there does exist the required buffer from other uses. Portions of the site that would benefit from some landscaping will be seeded with mixes appropriate for the area, as noted on the landscaping plan. In essence, most of the 37 acres of this property will be turned into an informal open space. If you visit the site now, you will note some stunning red-winged blackbirds there and a number of wild turkeys who are living there.
Boom.
And they will not be disturbed. Global has, although the turkeys can disturb. Global has raised a couple of concerns with Clinton's regulations in sections 10.50 and 10.51 of the regulations. Specifically, there are a few sections in those regulations that, while probably appropriate for liquid fuels, are not appropriate for gases, and they conflict with the state and federal regulations that apply to propane. There is one section, section 10.51.2E, that would limit the times that rail deliveries could be made to the site. It is likely that when the regulation was passed, and I understand it was passed fairly recently and has not been used until this time, that only truck deliveries were in mind. But by its wording, it applies to rail also, and is therefore preempted by federal law, as explained in the legal memo that Attorney Slater has submitted to the Commission. The other details that conflict with state and federal law are 10.51.2C2, which requires a 14-foot high opaque fence. Federal and state law require a fence at least 6 feet high that is chain link, so the tanks that are enclosed by the fence can be seen through it. Subsection 5 of the same section requires containment for the tanks, which is appropriate for liquids, but undesirable for gas, and also violates state and federal safety regulations. If the site is to comply with section 10.51.3F of the regulations, which requires compliance with NFPA standards, it cannot also comply with the details that we just mentioned. The two are in conflict. Also, section 10.50.2F and 10.50.3M require compliance with the NFPA and all state and federal regulations. Therefore, as explained in Attorney Slater's opinion, the state and federal regulations would prevail. All these requirements are in place to make the site safer, so the public policy behind adhering to the state and federal regulations is also satisfied. There is here tonight Mr. Lavengood, Mr. Richard Lavengood, who is a safety expert that the town has hired in order to review these plans, and I wonder if you would like to hear from him at this point.
Well, I, for one, have some questions of Mr. Lavender, but it's up to you if you want to utilize him for testimony.
I think it might be helpful for everybody to hear from him at this point. That's okay with all of you. Mr. Lavender?
Any particular subject you want me to broach?
Fire safety.
Okay, we'll talk about that. I can get unpacked here a little bit.
Point of information, these people should sign in. These speakers should sign in, am I correct?
No.
No? Okay.
Perhaps I need to clarify something. Mr. Lavengood is not the Global's expert. Mr. Lavengood is hired by the town to review Global's plans. So he is the town's expert, he is not our witness.
Mr. Willie's paying him.
Okay, I know that some of you are having trouble hearing before. I'll try to make myself heard here. If I fail to be heard, wave your hand, I'll understand. I tend to tail off. My background, very quickly, I've submitted it to the board, but I do a lot of propane work. I'm out of Massachusetts. I have my own environmental consulting company. I do propane tank inspections for the State Fire Marshal in Massachusetts. We do annual inspections, and I'm authorized by him to do that. I'm authorized by DHS to do site inspections for propane facilities, and I've done a number of those. What else do I do? Oh, I've been trained at the Massachusetts Firefighting Academy, and I'm a certified first responder to propane events. That's about it.
So you didn't tell us nothing?
I visited the facility, the site once. I saw nothing that excited me at that time, except I had a question about the water supply. I understand that's been answered. I've met with the fire department twice. From what I've seen of the fire department, your Clinton Fire Department is as good as any I've seen in Connecticut. I've done perhaps 2 dozen other sites in Connecticut. The fire department seems to be good. I gave them some training materials that I think would be appropriate. Brian seemed to be receptive, and these are dealing with propane incidents. There's a major propane response program that's been developed by the Propane Gas Association has developed a whole safety program. There's a textbook, like so. With it, there are training materials, PowerPoint presentations, DVDs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, to go with this. And this is all propane incidents, whether it be the propane barbecue grill incident, a truck turned over on the highway, a fire at the propane plant, whatever. They're all covered in here. So Brian seemed to be interested in following through with that. The most common, as somebody suggests, the most common propane incident is going to be a 20-pounder. The next common is going to be a street accident, highway stuff. And the Propane Gas Association of New England has set up a response team so that within each state there is a specific individual that the fireman can call from Connecticut, call this guy, I'm here, here's my situation. The truck is overturned, or this or that, whatever. He can then marshal the appropriate resources from the propane people who know propane, who have compressors, who have vehicles, who have whatever it takes to deal with the situation. So you're not alone out here when something happens. If the truck turns over, there are people who've done that before who are on call to come to Glen and help out. So I was pleased with the response. I just did my refresher training on the propane incident. It's a lot of fun. I was there with a bunch of firemen. There were 2/3 firemen this time. The last time I did my training was half firemen, half propane people. So I enjoy it. It's fun, and I get to go out and squirt water on fires. The other issue that, Diane, do you want me to talk about Cameo now or not? Okay. Yes, please. I'm actually giving you one idea. Yes, okay. Cameo is a computer program generated by the EPA, federal government, and it models a lot of things. I've done a lot of computer modeling in the past, and I was rather surprised to see the computer models came out recently. In my document, I said when I first took my computer class, and this was back in the 1960s, if any of you can remember that, the instructor went up to the board, the first thing he did, he wrote in big bold letters, all models are wrong. He then talked for 50 minutes. And he went back up to the board, and in smaller letters, he wrote, some models are useful. So 50 years later, I remember those 2 things. I don't have any idea what it said in the middle. So all models are wrong, some models are useful. The models that I saw presented here, I had great problems with the input data. The first model, as I recall, and I may be wrong on this, was a propane tank with a 2-inch hole in the side of it. And I asked myself, how can I put a 2-inch hole in a propane tank? I don't know how. So I'm modeling something that I don't know how to simulate in reality. And the next one, same thing, the hole, except this time it was flaming, so I still don't know how to put the hole in there. And then the next was a levy of some sort that might actually happen, I don't know. There was a problem with that because they assumed that 100% of propane would be ignited. That's technically impossible. Propane will not burn unless it is, I call it 2 to 10% in air. So you can't have 100% of the propane burn. All you can do is a little bit on the outside. So again, the model was not set up well. But the most important thing was let's talk about let's talk about hose breaking. And now we got a hose breaking, and the hose emits propane for 1 hour. When propane is being transferred by a hose, there's an operator standing there. An operator has been trained by what's called CTAP training, and he's standing there. He can't go away, he can't be on his cell phone, he's standing there. If an incident happens, he goes here, pushes a button, and all the valves close, the entire plant. So to say that this hose broke and propane came out for an hour, not realistic, doesn't work. So what I did, I provided some numbers that were generated by the Propane Gas Association, modeling exactly this. They say the hose broke and remained broken for 3 minutes. Still awfully slow. If I'm standing there and the hose breaks and I have to go here to push the button, well, by the way, if I find out an inconvenient, there's another one over here 25 feet away. There's several buttons around. When I push a button, it's over. So when they say 3 minutes before it's shut down, that's reasonable. It should be a lot less than that, but worst case. And they find that the vapor dispersion distance to the lower flammability limit is on the order of 300 feet. So that's very, very, very different than the picture you saw. And I've got all the details here that will be available to you if you want to. But the first 300 feet when a hose breaks is potentially dangerous. Depends on how fast I or whoever gets over there and pushes the button. If you push it in 1 minute, and it's less than 300 feet. So worst case, we're looking at 250, 300 feet, something like that. These are realistic models that are designed to guide operation of a facility. And the data I just gave you is, I think, 15 or 20 years old. No one's ever challenged it. Anything else, Diane?
Mr. Laverne?
Yes, sir.
I want to make a point of clarification. The first report that you submitted to the commission addressed the issue of vandalism and also potential terrorist acts. What I don't believe it addressed is accidents, and I will be asking you specific questions about that when the proper time comes. But for the time being, if you want to address the vandalism and/or the potential terrorist threat, please do it.
The question, and it's curious, as I said, I've worked a dozen of these sites in Connecticut alone, I'm all over the place, and I've never before been asked the question that these gentlemen asked me. What happens, I won't give all the details, but it's a Friday night and some people are wanting to go out and raise a little hell, so they decide to attack the propane plant. What can happen? First thing is chain link fence and it's locked. Trippy. Bolt gutters, you're in. Now you're in the plant. Now you have all these tanks here. They all have valves on them, and I'll tell you a little bit more than you need to know maybe, but they've got internal valves. They're up inside the tank. All of these valves are closed because the little button that I was talking about before operates a pneumatic system. And you have to have 10 psi pressure in there before any of the valves are open. So if I go over and push that button, I'm relieving the pressure and all the valves close. If the valves are open and a fire somewhere burns my little plastic hose into, the hose on this looks like aquarium tubing. If that hose burns in too, the pressure is released, all of the valves close. I have nothing to do. So if I come in as a vandal and I want to beat on this, now the tanks are nearly 3/4 of an inch thick, so I can take my sledgehammer, pound on them all I want, it doesn't matter. I can rig up the piping on it, rip the piping out. The valves are inside the tank, and they're designed with a shear groove, so if the pipes are stressed, they break outside the tank, leave the inside the tank. So I can rip that off, that got me nowhere. I can build a fire. No, I can't, don't have propane. Basically, I, as an experienced vandal, I can come in, I can repressurize that system because I know how to do that. Now, if I then open a valve and let the propane run out, there's what's called an excess flow valve in there that will immediately shut off because the flow is too great. And then it'll shut off and I've got nowhere. As an experienced vandal, I know how to beat that. So I'll drill a little hole in the pipe that's not big enough to let the excess valve go off. Now I've got a fire going underneath the tank. Now I'm looking for levy. The valves have fusible link in them. At 250 degrees, the link melts and the valves all close. So with my knowledge of how they are built and designed, I don't know how to cause a major incident. I'm sorry to say. 11 years of engineering school wasted, yes, ma'am.
Having good, we're doing it outside of the procedure that we want to employ. So
Oh, okay.
you're not going to take questions from the audience independent of what I say, okay?
Indeed, you're the boss.
They're already wasting
Okay,
time.
I can see you privately or whenever it's appropriate. Okay,
The answer-
I'm done.
I'm done, okay, we're done. Attorney Whitney, is there anything further?
Well, let me talk about, you also, somebody asked me about the rail cars too. That's slightly different for vandalism.
Yes,
Okay?
I mean, you haven't
Okay.
finished with the vandalism, you haven't finished with the terrorist activities.
Okay, the terrace we'll get to in one. Okay, the rail cars have valves only on the top of them. You see the dome up on top of it? That's locked. Okay, so my bolt cutters, I open that up. There are 3 valves in there. 2 of them are connected to the liquid, 1 is connected to the vapor. If I open the one that's connected to the vapor, it's designed to let vapor in, not out. It immediately, the backflow check valve stops it. It won't come in. If I open the liquid valves, they're designed to let liquid out at a given rate. As soon as I open the valve and it's unrestricted, the excess flow valve, again, that we talked about before, closes. So I don't know how to create an incident out of those tanks either. They're designed differently and very different. But they all have excess flow valves on them, they all have backflow check valves, they all have things that I, as an engineer, don't know how to defeat. Now, I was just playing the role of terrorist there, perhaps. I do, for Department of Homeland Security, I do what's called a top screen analysis, which is the first thing you just determine, what is the site like? What does it have? And if the top screen analysis suggests that it might be vulnerable, then we go to the next step, which is called the site vulnerability analysis. And I do those for Homeland Security also. I've never had them ask for the 3rd step. If the site is vulnerable, after my analysis they say it's vulnerable, the next step is to say you must have a site security plan to protect against terrorism. None of my sites have ever been asked for the 3rd step, so I don't know. I've done several, and the site vulnerability to terrorism was low enough in Homeland Security's opinion that it did not trigger the next step.
Good night. Sit down.
Attorney Whitney, is there any more rebuttal, which is what I've characterized it as?
One more.
Okay, you want to take this?
There is one more witness we would like to present at this time, and that is Doug Fountain, who is also a safety expert. You have his resume that was given to you tonight.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Doug Fountain. Doug Fountain, the company I represent is SFC Engineering. We are a consultant. We're a consultant to global partners. Our company has a lot of experience with multiple propane facilities all over New England, and we consult for a lot of liquid fuels and lots of different fuel matters in this way. I've been involved with this project for quite a number of months and I'm quite familiar with the details of the mechanical design and fire safety analysis, the fire safety design for the fire suppression for the site and water supply for the site. Essentially a few things that I'd like to say just to augment things that Mr. Lavengood has touched on. In the state of Connecticut, I mean, some people here may have heard my colleague Nick Crescenti speak at the last meeting relating to this project. He spoke about the National Fire Prevention Association, NFPA. They are an organisation that independent reasonably of government that creates standards, including fire codes that are used right across the United States. They would have produced a fire code for this building and lots of other facilities, including the propane fire code, which is NFPA 58. In the state of Connecticut, the 1995 edition of NFPA 58 is adopted by the state. Having said that, the majority of propane systems that are installed, including the proposed system for novel drive, they're made to a standard that's far beyond that. So in the late 1970s, 1980s, there was a number of propane facility explosions. That history led to a large a review of many of the safety features on propane tanks at propane facilities, particularly with regard to bulk tanks. And since then, there has not been a large explosion like some of the events that I think that some people are worried about this evening.
Blue Rhino in Orlando, Florida, last week.
Excuse me.
No.
He's not asking members of the audience if you would just refrain from comments until the proper place in these procedures.
I might address Blue Rhino anyhow. Blue Rhino was a facility in Florida. It was an explosion event that occurred last year. At that facility, they were filling small propane tanks, 20-pound tanks, like what you'd have in your grill, when you're cooking a barbecue or something along those lines. A fire started that related to those small tanks. A number of the small tanks ruptured. But the bulk tanks at the site that they used to store, the large amount of propane and fill the small tanks with, they were untouched. There was fire around them, but they did not explode. And there's a similar system in terms of bulk storage at that site, which was, held fast during that fire, is to be built at this site. So what we're talking about here is a large bulk storage tank. It has a lot of safety features that you don't find on small 20-pound tanks, and that goes to things like internal valves, multiple redundant ventilation devices, if the tanks can overheat, things like that. It's really chalk and cheese, the level of safety that you go from a small tank like that did explode at Blue Rhino to a large bulk facility. So it's not able to be compared, in my opinion, those two events. I might respond quickly to, there was a report that I saw that was submitted to the town that I think it was called Airborne Dispersion Modelling. It was a cameo model. It was submitted by the intervener that I believe the board is aware of. There was a number of maps in that report that show blast radiuses from tanks and lots of sort of scary looking stuff that on face value looks quite intimidating. And that's something that, if that was the only piece of information that you saw, you would be worried. Cameo is software that was used by the people that compiled that report. It was originally developed in the 1980s. It's EPA software that doesn't just model propane, but models a wide range of chemicals. And it's designed to be severely overcompensatory. And the reason for that is that it's not designed as a model for the siting of tanks. If you were to rely on that software in terms of the radius that it will give you for a danger area, propane systems simply would not be built, they'd be outlawed. So really what you've got to look towards in terms of radiuses or distance or setback distances for propane facilities is the state regulations, and that is NFPA 58. And those setbacks are well and truly made with this site. There's lots of room. So realistically, in that way, the report, I feel, gives an unfair representation of the danger of the site. Realistically, in the way that it was modelled, there has never been an explosion like that from a bulk tank ever in history. One of the key issues there is that if you read the report, it's modelled such that 100% of the propane, and Rich touched on this already, but 100% propane in the tank combusts all at once. And that's something that it physically just can't happen. It's, there's only so much propane that will be at the explosion amount that will explode. Anyhow, so I guess in summation, this facility is going to well exceed state regulations for what would be appropriate for a site like this. There's more than enough room relative to those regulations. And realistically, it is a system that is very similar to many systems in New England. Certainly many systems that I've worked on. And it's not the only propane storage in Clinton. In fact, the previous facility, I inspected the site today. The previous factory that was on that site, the previous facility had a 30,000 gallon propane tank. That tank is still there. It looked to be decommissioned. But there's a history of propane on the site. It was there in the previous use. So personally, I don't see that there's much change in terms of risk for propane storage.
Attorney Whitney? Okay. We're at the point where we're going to have participation from the audience, but before we do that, there is one question that I need to ask these two engineering experts, safety engineering experts, that perhaps the audience is thinking of, but if they're not, I'm going to raise it right now, and then we're going to open it up to the floor. The concern I have is not so much the safety features that are built into these tanks. I would like to know what type of force is required to breach one of these tanks. And I understand they're 3/4 of an inch thick. And there should be a ready calculation possible. I recall from my college days, force equals mass times acceleration. I need to know how much force needs to be generated by a mass, an object, moving at a certain speed to create a breach. And then we'll get to the point of what that breach might do if it were to occur. Obviously, it's a hypothetical. It's in the event of an accident, not a deliberate act of either vandalism or terrorism. I don't know which one of you two engineers wants to address that, but I would like the question answered. What type of force is required to breach one tank? And I'm talking about the 45,000 gallon tank.
Neither one knows. We got to Jesus, honey.
They don't know.
So there's lots of different forces that could be applied to the tank. I guess the easiest way to consider it is when you consider it for seismic loading for an earthquake. On a tank that's perhaps located in California or somewhere like that. The tanks are strong enough to fly up off their footings and bounce on the ground in an earthquake, and they're designed for that. So in terms of a truck colliding with one, yes, it would move it. Yes, there's a possibility of breaking some pipe work, or you'd have automatic seal off of the internal valves, and there would be no breach of the tank. And further to that, I mean, the bulk tanks that will be installed are similar in construction to what you find on the back of a moving propane delivery transport, and those can sometimes crash at highway speed, which is a considerable amount of force, and 9 times out of 10 they don't leak. When they do, there's very rarely a fire.
What about a train? Thank you.
Mr. Fountain, I asked for what type of force is necessary to breach a 3/4 inch thick steel tank, which is what we're dealing with here, correct? Is there a ready calculation for that?
I don't have it on hand for you, but perhaps I could.
Okay. I'm gonna need that, because the thought I have in mind is accidents happen. I'm sure I'm not the only one that's thinking of this. You could have a small plane crash into the facility. Is that sufficient? I don't know. You could have a speeding train crash into the facility after derailment. I don't know if that's enough. You know, I am not an expert. I just know the formula. I need to know what type of force and whether one or both of those events could cause a breach of a tank. If the answer is then yes, I need to know whether that is something we should worry about.
So just to confirm, you're looking for specific details on light aircraft or an aircraft crash or a train derailment?
Not a big aircraft, a small
A
aircraft.
light aircraft, yeah, a Cessna,
F-16.
into the tank, or a train derailing into the tank
At a certain speed.
at a certain speed. I assume it'll be Amtrak speed.
We got the accelerator.
That's 100 miles an hour.
I'd be lying if I said I had those numbers for you right now. Let us respond to it. That's okay.
Thank you. Mr. Lavender?
You know, basically, I'm taking the same position. There have been calculations made on the plane crash, I think I have access to those in my files. But I've never seen or heard of anything on the train crash. But the plane calculations have been made in California, and they were not surprising. They were not terrorizing. It was the city of Sacramento, I think, and it's 20 or 30 years ago, so planes may be a little larger now, but that calculation has been done. I've never seen anything on the trains. Doug said something about the rollover of the trucks. The trucks that are on the road delivering your propane are actually designed to roll over. That's part of the design criteria. So we're going to go out and wreck them, and they must withstand. You may recall in Toronto there was the big fire a couple of years ago where there was all the propane, they said it was propane, actually it was acetylene. There were 2 tanks inside that blazed, and blazed for 24 hours. And when they got through, the 30,000 gallon tank, or maybe it was 18, had been blown off its stands, was lying on the ground, intact. The delivery truck had had its tires burned off of it. The tank was intact. So these things are pretty durable, and they're designed to be that way. Can they be broken? Yeah.
And the next question is, if that were to happen, is that a problem?
Doug and I will be back to you. It's the next question. I've never been asked that question. And it's a question of, does the train have to be doing 60 miles an hour or 600 miles an hour? There is a speed at which the train will puncture. We'll have to calculate that for you.
Okay, with that, I'm going to open it up to the audience, and I'm going to ask for comments in favor of the application first. I would ask you to come up to the table, sign your name, address the commission, and we'll go that way. Is there anybody in favor of the application that wants to speak? No. Yep.
Oh, Jesus.
As a matter of fact, there are several of you that wish to speak in favor of the application. I would ask that you come to the table now and form a line so that we can save some time.
Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission, my name is David Chu. I am with the Connecticut Energy Marketers Association. We represent heating fuel retailers and wholesalers in Connecticut, and Global Companies is one of our members, in fact. I want to just restrict my remark to 2 points, and that is the strategic need for additional storage here in Connecticut, and also let me just touch on the safety issue in a more generic sense, as already been gone in depth there. As you know, propane is a widely used energy product with varied applications. Supporting the storage and transportation of propane is a complex national infrastructure, including over 13,000 bulk storage tanks. Here in Clinton and in the surrounding towns, 5 or 6 towns, some 3,765 households heat their homes with propane, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, and many more, of course, use propane for cooking grills, generators, and fireplaces. But despite this impressive infrastructure, propane supply is actually quite inadequate to meet the growing demand of this critical product, especially here in New England. Demand for propane has grown tremendously nationwide in agriculture, and also, just as we all experienced this past winter, much colder than normal, that has drawn down propane supply by 850 million gallons. Aggravating this was also that the Midwest and South has diverted a lot of the propane that normally comes from the Northeast down to those areas because they had a cold winter as well. Putting the greatest strain on supply actually has been exports. There have been 2 billion gallons of propane exported in the past year, and that has drawn down domestic supply considerably. According to the Propane Gas Association of New England, our region sells 7% of the propane, of the nation's propane, but has only 1% of the primary storage. Now, lack of local storage means that propane retailers and wholesalers have to travel quite far in order to find supply. Their trucks have gone to New York, New Jersey, Ohio, even into the South in order to get supply when supply is short here in Connecticut. The governor, for instance, has eased up hours of service waivers in order to allow this increased time to find supply. Shortages have resulted in customers being put on allocation, or that is on waiting lists, especially those who don't have supply contracts. And short supply also means fluctuating higher prices that customers have experienced. So additional propane storage is of critical strategic importance to this region. Therefore, we strongly recommend and support Global Company's application to build a storage plant here in Clinton, because it will directly benefit the 3,765 households that heat with propane here and in neighboring communities. You heard a lot about some of the technical aspects of safety, and you addressed very specifically some of the questions that you have. Just more generally, OSHA, the Federal Safety Administration, reports that back in 2012, there were only 6 serious accidents that involved injury to workers at a propane bulk storage plant across the entire nation. That's for 13,000 different spots. And none of those involve large explosions, as you might see in the movies or things of that sort. According to the Federal Department of Energy, which also tracks industrial accidents at energy storage facilities, the odds of a serious accident at a bulk storage propane plant is 1 in 37 million. This is the Department of Energy. That's 27 times more likely that you'll be hit with lightning than you will be involved in a serious accident involving an explosion at a propane storage tank. Why is this the case? As we've heard, the staff at these plants are highly trained professionals who are acutely aware of safety protocols. The storage equipment itself, as we've heard, have various safety features designed into them, such as these pressure relief valves, excess flow valves, remote and passive shutdowns. So therefore, I'd like to say in conclusion that storage plants, such as the one being proposed by Global, fills a critical strategic role for Connecticut in general and for the residents of Clinton and surrounding towns in particular who heat with propane. And commercially operated storage plants are safe and reliable and are operated by safety-conscious personnel.
Sir, I noticed you're reading from a prepared remarks. Would you like to submit those into the record? Thank you. Anyone else in favor of the application? I'll ask again, anyone else in favor of the application? One last time, anyone in favor of the application? Okay, those of you who are opposed to the application and would like to speak, same rule, come to the table, sign in, and form a line, since I anticipate we don't have to travel all this.
Easy, people, easy.
I got a few questions.
Now, while we're doing that, once again, want to caution you not to be repetitive. We have already heard much of what I suspect might be brought up again. Try to address your issues to what you heard tonight, and not what you heard hearing necessarily. And if you've already spoken, that goes up to the
Yeah, Mike, you're growing. I grow in spurts. I get up in the morning at a half-inch long. Give me a half hour after I get up and I'm in short.
I asked earlier for courtesy. This is now one of those points when I'm requesting it again. Please be silent so the speaker can address the commission and the rest of you.
Sir, thank you very much. My name is Kurt Sustep. I'm a resident of Madison. Just by way of background, I was a first responder at the World Trade Center. I'm sorry. Did you sign in? I did.
You did.
No, sir. By all means.
Lori Santos, I believe.
Lori, please, ma'am.
Thank you very much.
Can you hear me? Okay, my name is Lori Santos. I live on Commerce Street in Clinton. It's been quite a while, but perhaps over 10 years, but I was on the zoning board of appeals for well over 10 years. And I'm used to looking at these issues, and I've read the tome of the general principles that the leader was the tome of planning and zoning that is written by Mr. Byrne from the state that talks about general principles of zoning. And that's what I would like to address here. Some of the issues, or the issue that is most important for the citizens of Clinton are these. Is this in the best interest of our town? How does this fit into the town's plan of development? There are no jobs to speak of. I believe there are 4 or 5 jobs coming to this. There's really negligible tax revenue from this project. In fact, it's quite embarrassing to me. When you consider 20 large trucks traversing the streets, and in particular Knollwood Road, whose residents apparently have been thrown under the bus, you have to think about the wear and tear to the roads and the disturbance of the community that there is around here. From 7 a.m. in the morning until 8 p.m. at night. And this is a storage facility. It is nothing more. And it is one that affects the surrounding property values. And I want to underline that 50 times. If, this project were to be done, possibly the best way to do it would be to offer the people on Knollwood Road a couple of $100,000 per resident, and basically then open the project. I don't have doubts that the science behind this that was presented by the engineers, although very sloppy and 20 or 30 years old in some cases, it's not, I'm not questioning that. I'm just questioning the zoning principles of your town and the books that you are abiding by as a planning and zoning or zoning board of appeals members. And this should be what this decision is based on. You are not increasing property values. You are not bringing in manufacturing industry that is going to give this town many jobs and lots of revenue. You are bringing in something that is going to basically be wearing to the town, decrease property values, and screw up our roads, and basically make it more expensive for Clinton. And I couldn't believe that the revenue that is being proposed for this is what it is. But apparently that's what it is. And $100,000 a year? Not much. That doesn't, count for much of anything. So that's all I have to say. After being on the zoning board for 10 years, I think it's a travesty.
Dave from CMA. Kurt?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
You can give a microphone to the lawyer. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much, folks. My name is Kurt Suzak. I'm a resident of Madison, Connecticut. By way of my personal background, I was a first responder at the World Trade Center. I was a first responder, and I went to Katrina to assist in the reconstitution of the New Orleans Police Department. I spent a year and a half in Iraq in my second tour. I spent 3 months in Iraq in my first tour. To answer your question about how hard is it to penetrate 3/4 of an inch of armor, metal, a 308 with some type of high-powered 308, possibly, if it's got Kevlar, we'll go right through that. When I was in Iraq, I wouldn't actually wear the plates I had because they'd be defeated by a simple M4. You can buy that ammunition at Walmart, so it's easy enough to figure out how fast and what type of rounds go through that metal. What are the risks here? First of all, the federal government just came out with new flood maps. If you look where this is, it's actually within that radius. Why does that matter here? Because if there's a problem here, if there's a hurricane or a big storm, that limits the ability for the fire department, for Clinton and Madison to get to the area. That's simple. We have to worry about having our fine firemen, our fine policemen go there. Now the setback area that was talked about was 50 feet. In Toronto, when they had the emergency in Toronto, they evacuated 1.6 kilometers, not 50 feet. We have to worry about the flood maps. We have to worry about hurricanes, the road access. But this type of issue doesn't come up without a cause. Another fire, a hurricane, floods. That's what we have to worry about. And we're putting our people at risk. Now I understand there was a pamphlet here. The pamphlet but I didn't hear anybody give a test to our firemen. Did they actually test them on with the knowledge? Or did they just give them a pamphlet and say, this is how you put this fire out? Oh, by the way, best I can tell, in Iraq, when we had this type of issue, we got away from it. We cleared the area. We didn't try to fight a fire like this. We tried to get people to evacuate and be safe. That's the problem here, is there's a lot of people in this area. We also have the issue of Madison. We have a wonderful fire department in Madison. We have a wonderful fire department in Clinton. Unfortunately, in Madison, the center of town, one of the buildings just burned down right across from the fire station. Wait, this is the second time this has happened. In the 1980s, the same thing happened. It's a volunteer fire department. It handles light emergencies. Here, we have what really is a heavy industry. It's disguised as a light industry. I understand there's money to be made because it looks like a scrap piece of land. But in Clinton, it's not a scrap piece. It's got one access. One way, one access the other. Those can be cut through any type of natural issues. And we have to worry about that. Because who we're putting at risk are the fire department. Now, I understand they have a 1-800 number. He said they can call, Mr. Lavengood said, they can call a number and say, hey, how do you put out a propane disaster? Well, what happens if the cells are cut? In Madison, I've lived in a number of different areas. I said Iraq and New Orleans. I've had my power cut more times in Madison than I did in Iraq. I mean, we have to be realistic here. This is an important issue for us. It's a safety issue. The wonderful people in the PD, they're going to do whatever it takes to protect you. The fire department, they're going to do whatever it takes. But really, do we want to put them at risk for this? I said, no. Sir, I would hope that you would not vote in favor of this. I appreciate your time. I apologize for being over verbose. Thank you.
Keith, Keith? Can't hear you. I want to see if there's anybody else that wants to speak in favor, then I'll let you do that. Did you sign in? The opposition, right. You're next. Is he next?
Focus on our side.
No.
As you know, I'm Keith Ainsworth. I'm the counsel of the MS Environmental Trust, and I have some questions for the two gentlemen who testified. And I'll start with Mr. Lavengood.
Can't hear ya.
I'll try to speak up. I've been speaking all day, so I'm losing my voice. Mr. Lavengood, are you aware that there was a 30,000-gallon tank just recently that had a fire because it had its valve stuck open, and that was also down in Florida? Are you aware of that?
I saw the pictures about an hour before this meeting. I know absolutely nothing about the details.
That's how informed he is.
In your job as a propane safety expert, wouldn't it be of interest to you to keep on top of such events?
Please, let's try to keep it quiet while this examination is going on. I want to remind you, much like in a court of law, this is what happens. You have testimony and you have cross-examination. And when something appeals to you, the audience in a court of law does not stand up and applaud. So we're going to try to keep the same decorum that we would keep in a court of law. I know it's a lot to ask for, but I'm a lawyer and I'm going to insist on it, okay? Let's make believe we're in a court of law and exhibit the same courtesy you would in a court of law, okay? Please, go ahead.
If I were at home, I might have well been studying this. I had to drive down here instead. I was here in McDonald's when I first heard about this, so I don't know any details. I cannot respond intelligently. And if you want to pick on me because of that,
It's just a question. Now, Mr. Lavengood, you were hired by the town, were you not?
yes.
And were you hired to critique the intervener's presentation?
Not expressly, no. I was asked a series of questions, specific questions, some of which I answered today, and they wanted to know what's our susceptibility to vandalism if some drunken teenagers come down and want to attract this facility, what might happen, what's the threat of terrorism, what might happen if they attack the train cars. There were a lot of specific questions that I was asked. And I addressed all of those in writing, which you haven't seen probably, but they exist.
And prior to the meeting tonight, did you have conversations with Attorney Whitney for the applicant, or the applicant's panel?
Yes, I coordinated with Attorney Whitney about getting here. I've also met with your fire department a couple of times, and I've met with nobody else, nobody on this panel until tonight.
And you had no conversations with anyone from the interveners group, the Hamath Environmental Trust, correct?
Didn't know you existed until tonight.
Having 40 truck trips per day, 20 in, 20 out, of propane, would that increase or decrease the probability of a breach and an explosion within the town of Clinton?
going to increase the probability of an incident, but a breach or an explosion is, you're extrapolating now. Most incidents don't result in breaches and explosions. So you're taking a reality, more traffic, higher probability of traffic incident. Most traffic incidents do not result in breaches or explosions. Don't result in explosions. So you're using scary language to associate with the reality. The reality is more traffic on the road is higher probability of having a traffic incident. True.
Now, you asked the question, I think some hypothetically, you said, how do you put a 2-inch hole in the tank? And you couldn't think of a way to do that. I think the gentleman just stood up and said you could do it with a rifle, but couldn't you do it with a 50 caliber rifle or a shoulder-propelled rocket?
Shoulder-propelled rocket, yes. I specifically did not bring that in. I had that in my initial write-up. I crossed it out because I didn't think that's where we should be going. In my analysis for the Department of Homeland Security, frankly, Clinton is not worth an attack. Terrorists are doing economic attacks. And to take a shoulder-mounted weapon and waste it on a propane tank in Clinton would be dumb. We've got better places to take munitions. I didn't want to discuss this because I didn't feel it was appropriate, but if you want to hear it, that's it.
But it could be done.
Are you aware that in Connecticut, that there's an exemption?
Please.
Are you aware in Connecticut that there's an exemption from the Freedom of Information Act for water companies not to have to disclose where their reservoirs and water distribution systems are because they're considered terrorist targets?
I wasn't aware of Connecticut. I know that's not an uncommon situation. I would repeat that of all the propane facilities that I've inspected for Homeland Security, they never found any of them to be high probable targets.
Remember the audience, cross-examination is allowed under the law. That's what I'm allowed, cross-examination of the witness.
And just to explain, I only intend on cross-examining expert witnesses. I don't intend on cross-examining the audience.
That's nice.
Just to clarify. Are you aware that there is a technique of burying propane tanks to reduce the likelihood that there is a breach or a fire incident?
I am indeed.
Wouldn't that type of technique reduce the probability of a fire incident?
That type of technique is used to reduce the probability of flame impingement. That's the specific purpose. I, as an engineer, resent that technique, and it's the last choice because I want to see if there's corrosion on the tank. And when you bury it, I can't see whether it's corroded or not. So I have a personal bias against that. I participated in only one facility where we buried them because the nearest water was 1.75 miles away, and we buried them. There's also a mounding, which is a semi-burying technique, but the tank is above ground, but now you mount over it. Again, I don't like that because it poses corrosion problems, but it's a well-known technique where there's not available water supply.
Mounding is not proposed at this particular facility at the time. The next question I have is actually for Mr. Brown. Mr. Brown, do you know how the Blue Rhino fire began? What was the cause of it?
You know, so I'm not sure. I don't have that information for you.
Again, you had some opinions regarding the Blue Rhino fire and what happened there. I assume you find it of professional interest to stay abreast of these incidents. Is that true?
I do. And as I said, I told you what I knew about that. I don't have the specific cause for you. I'd be more than happy to respond to you that in writing, but no, I don't have it on hand for you.
And just to clarify, Did I hear correctly that you said there's never been an explosion from a bulk tank facility in history?
Not in the way that was modelled in the specific report I was talking about at that time. So what I mean by that is 100% liquid combustion. I mean, a blood explosion, like that's what I think you're referring to. The last ones that I'm aware of that occurred was in the 1970s and early 80s.
The 1970s and 80s were within history, were they not?
What was the question?
The 1970s and 1980s were within relatively recent history.
Yes.
Good answer.
And you also testified that the previous facility had a 30,000-gallon propane tank. You said, so there's a history of propane at the site. And then you said, so that's not much of a change. So in your opinion, it's not much of a change to go from 30,000 gallons to over 500,000 gallons.
That's correct, because we're talking about isolated tanks here. We're not talking about a 500,000 gallon tank. So realistically, the make of the tanks is very similar. They are isolated from each other, obviously joined by pipework, but mechanically isolated. So realistically, the risk is there's a lot of similarity.
But there is one major difference between the previous facility and the current one. To your knowledge, there was never any loading or unloading of propane onto propane delivery vehicles or retail delivery vehicles.
Not to my knowledge, but it would have had to have been delivered to the site by some means, I assume rail or truck.
True, and those would have been much fewer incidents or events because that was a single tank being filled up by, I assume, a single delivery, as opposed to 20 delivery trucks per day.
It's also likely that they didn't design the unloading in the same way that you would have for a 20-truck system. And realistically, I mean, yes, there's more incidents of refills and loading and unloading. Making up what it is.
Thank you.
Mr. May, you have the next individual.
Bruce Farmer.
Good evening, I'm Bruce Farmer. I live in One Liberty Village here in Clinton. And my first question I'd like to address the chairman of the planning and zoning this evening.
Order, please.
I'd like to know from the chairman of planning and zoning this evening if he will be reading the letter that I submitted to planning and zoning so that the audience can hear.
The answer, Bruce, is no, because if we read your letter, we're going to have to read everybody else's, and we have quite a number of letters. I can assure you that the commission has seen it, will see it, and so can the member of the public access it at any point during business hours in the land use office. Not because we don't think anything of your letter, it's because everybody else would want to have their individual statement also open. Do we have it available anyway at the moment? Okay, so it's available. If you want to take it and make it part of your statement, I can't prevent that.
I would like to read it because I think it's valid for everybody's consideration. So if you would bear with me, I'm not a public speaker by nature, but I thought that this was rather important. And it's regarding, obviously, the global companies. In my opinion, the accident risk at the proposed propane facility are...
Hold the mic,
Bruce, keep it right to your mouth.
Okay. In my opinion, the accident risk at the proposed propane facility, also on our roads in Clinton, and on our train rails is a real concern. My opinion and comments do not reflect the quality or safety standards of Global. The residents of Clinton should not have to worry about this operation in their backyard. The facility does not belong in our residential community. No matter what safety measures are employed by this company or any similar operation, together with regulations set forth by the state, the feds, etc., there are always issues which should be considered. I have 45 years of experience in the catastrophe loss of life and accident business, specifically in the insurance and reinsurance business, on big, horrible events that you can imagine that have happened in this country. And I can tell you that it only takes one event to create a problem. Some examples are as follows: an equipment failure at the facility, on the road or on the rails, employee errors, employee crime, derailment, yes, a plane crash, small one or a big one, a thunderstorm, a hurricane, a tornado, terrorism, even with the security fencing that's required, mistakes by outside contractors at the time of repairs or upgrades.
Oh, right there. Yeah. Yeah. Useless.
In regards to the propane rail cars, what is the age and condition? This is a concern, as well as who owns them and who maintains them. The pressure of the gas in the rail cars must be checked. It should be noted that the pressure was not regulated by the feds several years ago, but that is not the case now. The same issues that I have concerns with the rail cars goes to the trucks, as to ownership, age, condition, who maintains them, etc. We also know that the safest drivers on the roads can have accidents caused by others or an event. I believe we all remember the Amtrak derailment in Clinton, the building collapse in one of our industrial parks, and the numerous truck accidents on I-95. Also, why should our police and fire departments of Clinton and Madison have to monitor all the various aspects of this operation 24/7 when they are already very busy and overstressed? No matter what the owners of the propane operations say, and their consultants, and their lawyers, and what they do from a safety standpoint, the potential accident risk is real. So in my opinion, the questions and concerns of our residents boil down to this: why do we want this risk in our residential community? Because it is just a matter of time before an event, man-made or natural, causes something to happen. I will say this: to what degree the event risk is, we cannot know at this time. But the risks are there, they are real. On the site, on the rails, and on the roads. As many people in Clinton know, I am all for economic development and increasing revenue for our town, but not at the cost or worry of our families. Thank you for your thoughtful consideration.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Mr. Maine, who's next?
Leonard Farrell? Good evening, and thank the Commission for letting us speak tonight. I'm sorry for my political form. I wasn't hearing what I thought I should be hearing. My name is Leonard Farrell. I live at 34 Grove Street. Heard a lot about probabilities tonight, models. I'm here to talk about Blue Rhino because I'm a part-time resident of Florida. I followed it with a little interest. I wasn't close to it, but
I know a little bit about it. I'm retired, so I'm not an expert on anything. But I did read.
Join the crowd.
It was a plant that had 3 90,000-gallon tanks, and it was filling, yes, 20-gallon propane. I'm assuming that in the tanks here, something's going to be filled. 8 employees were critically injured about 10 o'clock at night. Something happened. OSHA seems to think in its last report I read that it was human error. Can't happen here, can it? Unfortunately, 8 people were critically injured. I'm here to speak from a public safety point of view, from a selfish point of view. I live within a 1-mile radius of the Millwood plant site. In Orlando, they evacuated at 10 o'clock at night, a mile radius around that plant, not knowing what was going to happen to those 3 90,000-gallon tanks. I'm sure they were afraid, these learned fire people, that something might happen. Accident, it's called an accident, happened there that night, and it could happen here. Now I want to point out, be short, there's the 1-mile circuit. It encompasses right down to the marinas, both I-95 and Route 1, the train tracks. It encompasses Clinton Crossing. It just touches Morgan High School, where my grandson's going to be going next year. And it comes right up to the river over here. It doesn't touch Town Hall, so they're safe. I plead to the commission that one of the primary responsibilities you have to us as townspeople, and I think public safety is a concern on most of these people's mind tonight. Please keep that of utmost importance in your deliberations tonight. We can't afford having an accident like that here. Thank you very much.
Hi, thanks for letting us speak again. I just want to know, just quickly, I'm going to cross-examine the audience. Is there anyone here who is not in a suit, who supports this, who does not work for the industry, who supports this?
Ma'am?
Your job as a commission is to represent the town. We are a residential town on the shoreline. We're not Wallingford, we're not an industrialized town. We are a bedroom community. I think it's great to see so many people out here together standing tough to fight against something that is not in the interest of any of us in this town. You heard the young man come up and give a presentation. He's very young. Clearly from the other side of the pond. This is clearly a global company, right? And this is not a global community. We're a small town. And I know that during these difficult times of globalization, we've lost industry. Unilever was here forever. It's gone. It's probably gone for cheaper taxes and environmentally laxer environmental rules somewhere. But for us to think short-sightedly and try to fill those kind of gaps with things that are going to permanently change the quality of this town from a small residential town into an industrial zone. You know, there's one thing when something is zoned commercial, and there's another thing when it's hazardous commercial. I was talking to a neighbor of mine who unfortunately is out of town tonight, and I said, well, we're just going to sit up on the hill a couple miles, not too far from the Morgan School, and watch the fireworks. And he said, oh no, listed 2 or 3 accidents in the very recent future, recent enough that this young man was around, so post-1970, and talked about windows blowing out 10 miles away. If you live up on James Vincent, this is going to affect you. It's not going to just affect our property values, the quality of our town. And the other question I would have, how many of you go to Job Lot? Subway. My kids go down to the subway in Job Lot all the time. Is that going to be when the accident happens? So, you know, it's human error caused every single one of these accidents. There's nothing we can do to regulate human error. So I really encourage the board, it seems to me this is a slam dunk for the commission, right? You represent us, here we are, vote against it.
Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Chairman and the entire commission. Clinton was founded as a town meeting form of government, specifically for the reason that the elected officials are not supposed to really make the most important decision. They're supposed to be made by the townspeople by showing up just like this. And obviously, come on, it's like unanimous here. We don't want it in town. And this is not an as-of-right application. In fact, this application is for a contaminated site that is surrounded by 2 pre-existing residential communities that will be deeply affected by this proposed facility if it were to pass. But the only way that it can go forward is with a special exception. I don't see any reason here to give a special exception. The most important speaker, I thought, was at the last hearing, Mr. Rob Lewandowski, who didn't speak that much about the facility itself, but about the transporting of this material. And he said that is the most likely scenario, that one of these trucks tips over or has an accident. And he talked about just any truck tipping over could tie up the entire area for an entire day. That's something that I think you need to take into consideration. The effects that this can have on the entire area. And I'd also like to just say that too often you have some high-priced experts who, with their bought and paid opinions, try to sway you. Nothing should be more significant than the opinions of the people in this room. And every facility that has had an explosion, I'm pretty sure, had a high-priced expert tell you that nothing would happen. You don't know what's going to happen. Please remember that.
How you doing? I've probably got a couple million miles under my belt over the years driving truck. I've hauled all kinds of chemicals. I've hauled gasoline. Never hauled any propane. But I've hauled just about anything that's dangerous that you can think of. Does anybody remember what happened at the clean energy plant up in Middletown about 5 years ago? When they were purging gas lines. 5 or 6 people died. One of the people that I used to work with, he is since deceased to pancreatic cancer from Kuwait. God rest his soul. He lived about 3.5 miles from that plant, across the river. When that explosion happened, it cracked his foundation, cracked sheetrock in the house, and blew 3 or 4 windows out in his house. And he lived in the woods. I don't know why you'd want to vote for something like this. I live about a quarter of a mile away from it. If this thing ever went, you wouldn't have to worry about the fire department showing up because there wouldn't be a goddamn fire department. And that's all I have to say about it.
How about somebody from 28 West Main Street? Or here,
Hi, my name is Ryan. I just want to say that tonight I've heard a lot of people talk. Hi everybody, my name is Ryan. I would like to start off by saying that Connecticut is just a beautiful, beautiful place to live. We are so blessed to live in this extremely beautiful environment. Tonight I've heard a lot of people talking about hazards to explosion, hazards to this and that, and of course everyone's safety is number one concern. But also, we have to remember our environment is a #1 concern. We have so many precious animals that live all along Long Island Sound, including offspring, which are endangered. They're making nests everywhere. There's also just Long Island Sound full of animals. It's come to my observation as a Connecticut native that our Long Island Sound is depleting. We have to get together and fight for the Long Island Sound, to fight for our environment and to protect it. If you walk down the beach in any of these surrounding towns, from Guilford and up, you'll notice that there's not as many seashell life on the beach, there's not as many horseshoe crabs. Horseshoe crabs, I hardly even see them anymore. What about the spider crabs? What about the fishermen and everyone else and everything? Our environment is something that we live off of. We eat from our Long Island Sound. And, I think that even if there is a small pressure break in the hose line or something happens, it's going to affect our environment even more. I mean, these precious things can be gone. They're already having a hard time, and we have to come together to fight for them, because no one else will. And all these global companies and corporate businesses, I understand you need a place to go. You need a place to make things happen for yourselves. But you're tampering with some serious, precious environmental regulation here. This area here is extremely important. Maybe somewhere inland that's away from communities, away from environment with endangered species might make more sense. I hope that we can work together and overturn this and keep on keeping on. Thank you very much.
Good evening, I'm Ron Bodens and I live in Madison. I do live closer than 1,000 feet. My residents and many of my neighbors and those in Allwood are closer than 1,000 feet to this facility. And there's a map that was submitted with the application that shows many residences within 500 to 800 feet. I don't know how they came up with a new measurement, but that gets to my point that you are the commissioners, and I think it's a fair issue about the credibility or disingenuousness of the information you are being given. And I think global can be judged by that. And I'd like to give 2 examples about whether you as commissioners feel comfortable with what you've been told tonight. The first issue is statistics. Both in the brief by Global and their customer representative tonight, they came up with very nice statistics about the danger of propane explosions. One of them was something to the effect that only 3 employees are killed every so many period of time, a year, 10 years, something like that. That study has been strongly criticized because it only talks about employees. It doesn't talk about the firemen who died, the disinterested people who happen to live within 500 feet or were going by, nor the contractors who work for the companies but weren't employees. It's a bogus study. It would be as if this building blew up tonight and we're all killed, and the gas company that caused it 5 years from now would say, oh, we only killed 5 Clinton employees and never mentioned the other 1,000 of us here tonight. It's a bogus study, and I think it reflects on the credibility of who's giving you that information. The other statistic they've given you tonight and in the brief is about a study that the danger of propane explosions are no more greater or even less dangerous than tornadoes, lightning, and earthquakes. Well, that study, where does it come from? You'll find it on the Trade Association website of the liquid gas petroleum industry. Global belongs to that. And the amazing thing is that study was done in the 1970s. Now, any trade association that involves gas has millions of dollars to spend, and you'd have to ask, why hasn't that study been updated since the 1970s statistics? And I think the simple reason is the industry would be embarrassed by what they found out, and we're then going to give you about statistics of people who died in propane explosions. And if you want to compare it to tornadoes, lightning, and hurricanes, if you just look at any website on Google, you can find out, like in 2012, 703 people died from lightning, tornadoes, and hurricanes in the United States. That's not a very comforting statistic. That's 2 a day. But what do we do in Clinton when lightning approaches? We clear the ball fields. What do we do when an earthquake comes? We evacuate. I'm from the Midwest. When a tornado comes, we take shelter. The problem with the propane facility is it's there 24/7 and there are no sirens going off. So when the missile goes by, and the missile is 40 trains going by from 25 to 60 miles an hour every day, once one of those strikes it, you're not going to get any warning. So again, I get back to, those are the statistics they're giving the commission to believe, and they're not believable. The second and final example is about fencing. You all have a rule that you created that says 14 feet for chemical tanks. They first say, well, you made a mistake, it doesn't apply to propane. But the title says chemical, oil, gas, and chemicals, and includes the title propane. I don't think Clinton made a mistake when they put propane there. Then they're suggesting, oh, you have to make it 6 foot because there's some law, there's some federal law. Again, she said it tonight, there's some federal law that says it has to be 6 feet. Well, there's been no citation to any federal law at all. All it is the NAFTA code, NFPA code. NAFTA is a trade association. It's a group of 700 companies that get together, try to create good techniques for firefighting and code enforcement. It's not a federal law. And what it says is a 6 foot minimum fence. 14 feet is higher than 6 feet, right? So if you have a 14-foot fence, it meets the minimum. They again said tonight, you can't do that, there's some federal law. If you have a conflict with NAFTA and your own code, there's nothing in the world that says you have to roll over and play dead. And there's no conflict. 14 foot is higher than 6 feet. And for them to come in here and suggest that you're violating federal law by not changing your own code is not credible. And again, I think it speaks to the kind of information you're giving. Thank you.
Thank you very much for allowing us to participate in this. I should introduce myself by saying I live in Madison on the other side of the river, near this plant, and I've walked around this plant and looked at it. But I submitted a letter today to the secretary, who I hope will circulate it to the Commission. I've testified for a number of years on zoning issues in New Haven, before the state legislature and in federal court. I'm a political scientist by trade, I should say. And I would urge the Commission to read in particular your zoning regulations, your own zoning regulations again, and to think about this application in light of sections 10.50 and 10.51, which applies to propane in particular. And I would ask you also to read carefully the document that Attorney Ainsworth submitted on behalf of AGT. He pointed out in that document a number of places where your zoning regulations are being violated by this application. The application has not adhered to your regulations. It's a deficient application, and it should be rejected on that basis. And just from my own personal point of view, I hope as you reject it, you will invite Global to take their business elsewhere. Thank you.
leaving. Have a seat.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee,
Good.
I'll be very brief, and that's unusual for me as somebody who's couch.
I bring this because if I fall down, I can't
Prior
get
to
up.
my speaking, has been perfect people going through it the second time. I'll just make a very short statement. Put it in perspective.
It says, hope I fall in the
Ask yourself why they don't allow propane.
No, well, I have to watch myself when I'm going through the woods.
But they do allow fuel. Ask why in many bridges across the country, they don't allow heavy tanked propane across those bridges. That should give you an idea and destroy all these speeches about its safety. I am very concerned. I love this village of Clinton, and I hope it will remain untarnished, and hope that you do what you can to defeat this proposal. Thank you.
Sal, Founders Group.
Sal Bedell. What I've been reading lately, there has been many explosions from propane facilities all over the country. In fact, there's another one just happening in Canada. And they blow up, and what happens with the propane, from what I've read, it's a liquid, which is pretty safe. But then it could be turned into gas, especially with heating going through the pipes and all. And when it turns to gas, that's when the explosion happens. And the explosion happened is cases that I just gave you, 55,000 square feet, part of the tank that blew off. And it's very, very dangerous. It's very scary. And that's really what I have to say. Thank you.
Alexandra?
Hi, my name is Alex Wetmore, and I'm part of Feminasset Environmental Trust, and I live at 14 Sandgate Circle in Madison. And I'd just like to make a comment that we've been collecting signatures for our petition, and as of this afternoon, we have 537 signatures, which is the total amount. On Thursday, we submitted to the committee 463 hard copy and online copy signatures. So if I may, can I submit these for the record? And I hope you deny this application. Thank you.
I'd like to answer Selma Delia's question, what kind of force that would take. You know, I like details. So I have an iron worker in my garage. I do metal fabrication on some of our farm equipment. It takes to put a 1-inch square hole in 3-inch and 3/4-inch plate steel, 60,000 pounds of force. To describe what that takes in my iron worker, the flywheel on that is 680 pounds. It spins at 350 RPMs. In a millisecond, the clutch drops this piece that's designed for cutting steel and cuts a square hole, a round hole, through up to 1-inch stainless steel, which is harder steel than what these tanks are being made of. If you were to take that math right there and to say, what does it take to go through these tanks? Sounds to me like this attorney and his gun is pretty close. The rocket effect is phenomenal. That's to answer that question for you, okay? Second off, I'd like to say if there was a Budweiser Global going on in that factory down there, and there was a leak, you'd have every town resident with a bucket down there trying to help out. But that's the difference between what can go in that building as opposed to running to the building with help as opposed to running away from the building and have help, okay? I'd like to remind each one of you tonight that Stanley Bostitch employed over 400 people. They were one of our biggest accounts when we owned the hardware store. Stanley Bostitch had 3 shifts. They were economically sound in our community. They were a wonderful company. They did a lot of social things in our town. And today, I look at the possibility of maybe 25 or 30 employees, some truck drivers, and it makes me wonder, and I'm going to say this because each one of you are nervous about this propane tonight. I'm not for it. I look at the economic input that comes in and what it would actually do to our community for the lack of a few jobs. It doesn't really seem that each one of you who are nervous about your homes and your family is really worth it. If I were to take the worst that could possibly happen, we have a Connecticut water company that seems like if we devastated their building, we would have more of an impact, not only just with the propane, but with the water company and its functionability, along with something like Long Hill Oil's big tanks that are there. Okay, so what is the multiplication of fire as it goes out? I look at some of these big things that could possibly happen, and each one of you folks today probably has a propane tank and a spare for your gas grill at home. So when you start to look at the little possibilities of how that could happen, it's kind of scary to a certain degree, and I can understand everybody's concern here tonight about our homes, our investment, and our community. And to me, it looks like there's 99% of you folks here that would love to maybe get up and say what you really feel, but you're afraid to, but you're here in support of maybe not having this approved. I also wanted to say that in the commission's decision to take on some of their own regulations, that they need to take a look at, some of them that are here, and that some of them even are down to the point where fumes are not allowed. And I know propane, everybody smells, that's the awareness that goes into that. There are several things going on here that the commission quietly can remember that when they said, please vote for me during the election, we'll do the best for your community. It is our community that they said that they would take care of us. And I just want to say that there's some of the most wonderful people on the board, and that we're hoping that they'll do the right thing. Thank you very much.
I am State Representative Tom Pacino. I represent Clinton, Madison, and Killingworth. And I've received an overwhelming amount of calls and letters from Madison, just to bring it up to the table. Thank you for letting me speak. Thank you for letting me speak. What I'd like to talk about, first of all, is property values, what this is going to do to our property values. You heard about safety and all kinds of doom and gloom. I'm not an expert at any of that, but what I can tell you is when someone comes to our area to buy a piece of real estate, the first thing they're going to look at is this project that is proposed to be built. This will hurt all the property values in our area, not just next to the site, but both towns combined. And as we're all having problems selling our homes, this will bring the property value down, which will raise our mill rate. No one likes to pay any more property tax than we have to, and this is a big problem with the values of our homes. I heard in the last meeting that this project would bring in about $100,000. $100,000 is nothing compared to what it's going to do to all of our property values in the area. This particular plant, the last time, 10 years ago or so, when I sat on this board with many of you here, this same piece of property was here was an application to clean the lagoons. At that time, when we gave them the permit, the truck travel time was only allowed after the school buses were off the road, which limited the amount of transportation of material across the road for safety. I haven't heard anything about that attending your meetings. this is not a good project. If this project has no economic development value, the limited amount of people that are going to work there are not going to buy gasoline in our gas stations, go to our restaurants, go to our stores. I can see if this was a place that was going to employ a lot of people, bring in money into the community, but there's really no big benefit for this particular site being so close to residential homes. This is a bad project. I urge you not to vote for it. You were put onto this board by the people. The people trust you to represent them, and as you can see, no one is for this property. Thank you.
I've been informed by Mr. Mays who's manning the notebook there, the notepad. There are no further comments. The people have signed up to speak against, in other words. So I am going to ask for general comments, not going on against, just general comments if there are any. And if it's just more of the same, I would caution you once again not to bother, because obviously we've heard quite a bit, and to be redundant is not going to serve really any purpose. And when we see you all here, we listen to a lot of testimony, we listen to a lot of your concerns, all of your concerns, in fact. So, general comments, are there general comments that anybody wants to make? Is that a yes? Wait a second.
My name is Kate Zarek, and I actually just have one question. I have 3 pages worth.
We need to have quiet in the room, and we're going to listen and hear this
Kate Zarek.
lady speak.
Most of my questions were after, when I had written down, people have already asked, but I have one that, okay. The one question I have, should you decide to do this, though I'm actually someone who's not in favor of it, is the liability for the town. And the question I have is, what is the financial liability for the town and the company? Who's financially responsible? Does Global Partners have any responsibility? You'll be using the most heavily traveled train corridor in the country. If the derailment or catastrophe does happen, does the town have any liability to that? So I'm really curious about all of the insurance, because some of the information that I've read about the company suggests that that is the one issue in the state of New York and in the state of Massachusetts that they do not address at any of these public hearings. So I hope they've addressed it for you. I have not been to the town to see what they've offered, but that is a huge, 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 huge issue.
Hi, my name is Ona Nadel, and I have one question for the commission. Millwood Drive, where this facility is going in, is that the site of the septic lagoons?
Yes.
That's a septic lagoon site. Thank you.
So that's going to be all over too.
Nobody didn't like what I had to say. I was very insulted by that man saying that Clinton, who would want to throw a bomb here? And I watched every face, especially yours, sir. I don't even know who you are, but I don't think you're really serious about that. Oh, well, okay, Mr. Leader. Thank you very much.
Good for you, lady. She walked out.
Hi, Maria Bernier. 2 points. And I'll paraphrase because I can't remember the exact words. But the engineer said, all models are wrong, or words to that effect. Most models fail. And then presented you with a model. And the model goes, I stand here, if the hose breaks, I press the lever. It stops all gas.
If the lever doesn't work, I press that lever very quickly. A couple of years ago, in New York, they were controlling trains, and the man had a biological summons. I suspect this man will have biological summons. Put an amateur on the buttons. What happened in West Haven? The man lost his life. Some models don't work. Second point, accidents don't happen. They don't happen in propane facilities. He said that. They've never had one. Tell the people up in Lake Gigantic, Quebec. Now, this was fuel, mind you. It never happened before. A train load of fuel cars rode down 7 miles, wiped out 21 homes and a whole population. So 2 points that were presented are false. Consider those, please.
Commission, thank you very much for the opportunity to ask questions. I actually am a resident of NOAA Drive, Katie McCollum, and I have been watching the traffic study take place. Lovely gentleman, long dread, sits in a car in Ocean State job lot. So I've been watching him participate in this traffic study. So some of the questions I have that I hope that you will consider when looking over his study, or his employer's study, is that that study took place between the close of school, if I'm correct, and before the heaviest of summer traffic occurred. So it's kind of in a lull of traffic. We should also take into consideration that there's been a lot of construction through the main center of town that has actually reduced traffic in some areas. So I'm not sure if that traffic study is actually going to be completely viable when we look at it. Second, I have, as a resident of NOAA Drive, watched numerous trucks turn down NOAA Drive. And oftentimes they use the Ocean State parking lot to turn around because they can't make the turn, either because they are inadequate drivers, improperly prepared, they're not like the gentleman earlier who spoke who's driven rigs for everybody. They often have to pull into that lot to make the turn. They actually just go around, turn around Ocean State, and then pull directly across the road. So that would be a second concern in the traffic study. And then we also spoke of, last time, if weather is a problem and the widening of the road or clearing of snow removal, because the traffic study was done in the summer months. Also, the residents of NOAA Drive often park on the sides of the road, further impeding traffic up and down the road. We also have to remember that traffic to the commercial residences, the bounce center, and to the sports complex in the back, if they choose to stay, given this proposal. If they choose to stay, there's a lot of traffic in and out of that facility, and that's not, there's no signage, there's no yield, there's no stop sign, etc. So that would be something to take into consideration, given our traffic study.
Okay, that was the general comments portion. So now I'm going to open it up to the commission for comments and questions. So this is your moment, Commissioner.
I have a question for the two experts. And both of you had said that 100% can't, I don't know if you're both still here, that 100% propane can't explode. Are you suggesting that, or is it the standard that what you're actually getting is the liquid actually smothers itself? Is that the point you're trying to make?
You don't know.
So essentially when liquid propane sits within a tank, there's partially, it's under pressure, as you're probably aware. It's under pressure, as you're probably aware. In that tank is both liquid and vapor simultaneously. The amount of vapor that there is depends a lot on how full the tank is, and obviously as the liquid is drained from it, there's more vapor, but that vapor has higher mass because there's less volume, there's less mass in it, there's less volume to be drained. Propane is like gasoline or any other flammable liquid or gas, can only combust when there is a certain percentage of fuel and air present. So a good example is if you take a match and throw it into a bucket of diesel or a bucket of gasoline, the match won't ignite that bucket because it gets put out by the liquid. There's not enough air fuel mix, like a motor. So what we're trying to say here is that in a liquid pressurized state, propane cannot catch on fire until it's had time to evaporate into a gas. And so if you look at a lead explosion or any kind of explosion in that way, you have a small sort of puff at the start, that's that initial vapor setting on fire, and then it takes much longer for the rest of the tank to ignite, I guess, in that way, which usually goes straight up in coal. So it's not, it doesn't add to the explosion if you get a bunch of, it's a multiple stage phenomenon in that way.
In a matter of about 30 seconds, I got up there and I left papers over there. Propane can explode.
Sir?
When it's turned into a gas.
Sir, it's now up to the commission to ask the questions. I have a question. Assuming for a moment that one tank were to be breached by an event, unspecified, there must be a force that could cause that event. Assuming it happens, is that a problem in itself? First part of the question.
I mean, it's a difficult question because you are talking about something that is considered like a negligible risk in terms of likelihood. I mean, if you rig any fuel tank to explode, yes, it's a problem.
That's number one.
Yeah.
Now, if it's a problem, if it is a problem and it were to occur, you have these tanks in serial, 6 feet apart, correct?
Boom, boom, boom.
One explodes and shrapnel is generated from this explosion. Can that pierce the next tank over?
Yep.
I don't know that you have the calculations to give me a definitive answer, but is that a problem possibility? In other words, you're going to have a domino effect. Is that what could happen if one explodes?
I don't have an exact number for you, but the idea with the 5.5 foot separation is such that there isn't radiant heat from like a jet fire or something like that along those, from a protruded hole in a propane tank. And to be honest, no, it's usually if you see a tank farm along these lines, and there has been studies done, when you explode one, the idea is that usually it would blow longitudinally rather than horizontally, and it's part of the design of the layout is that it can't be affected in that way. And that's something that's well laid out in the regulations to avoid that scenario that you described.
You have a train that derails at 60 plus miles an hour, impacting the first tank in its path. You see that as a potential problem? Aside from the probabilities of a train derailment, if one were to occur, does that cause a problem?
I can't answer that question.
Okay, are you aware that Amtrak has a track that goes right by, and you do know that the Acela speeds by a couple of times a day? Okay. Has that been taken into consideration in your safety assessment?
Probably not.
Oh,
come on.
I think they probably heard it, right?
I did not.
You're loud.
I didn't hear it.
He said, go ahead.
That's what you acknowledge. Look, I personally have not, done a major study on that risk. To be honest, the tanks are so far back that it's, there isn't provisions that I'm aware of under a state or federal regulation to address that in that way. And look, I don't have a definitive response for you on that, and I'd like to perhaps reply further. But I think that realistically, it comes down to, it does come down to a likelihood scenario, and it's not a, that wouldn't be considered a standard, it's not really a standard risk in that way, or something that sort of in my focus here, but perhaps it's best that I reply in writing on that.
I have a question. You did the safety analysis. How far is the tracks? How far are the tracks from the tanks?
We want to take into measure.
Yeah, please.
Can I just ask you all your questions? Because this is more than, this has three components. Ed's asked the question that really speaks to the underlying. That's why.
We can't hear you. Hear a thing you're saying.
If they're 20 feet, they're doing good. Just to where the other tracks are.
Take 6 of them.
Excuse me, can I issue a comment? A quick comment? No? Okay.
But they, I was been in the last review.
We're gonna put it over at the Cedar Hill Rail Yard, in North Haven.
Recess 5 minutes while they're doing what they're doing.
Yeah, the lagoons are fucking like all.
Can't hear a thing you're saying.
He's talking to the commission. Respect.
Showing the commission a plan of the facility that shows where the bulk tank placed in relation to the rail lines. I currently have 140 feet, 3 inches from the closest tank to the property line, and then a little more beyond that. So, so that's the shortest distance from a tank to the property line. You've got at least another 20 or 30 feet then to the rail itself. So 150 points.
The train lines are parallel to all the tanks this way, correct? Stacked up? You can turn that though.
Yeah.
So it's parallel to the train line, stacked up this way along the line.
Yeah, then you got the side.
I'm not sure I understand you.
Line is parallel.
Are you a member of the audience?
Yeah.
Okay. We're asking the questions.
All right.
So then from there you got the side.
That's correct. The siding comes in here.
So 150 feet, you say.
Give or take, but at minimum.
My question is related to that, and this is, we've heard a lot about tank safety, but this is a project that involves rail cars, tractor trailers with propane tanks on them, and propane tanks. And it abuts a main rail line. Nobody would debate that. I have some questions because we've been speculating about standards. I have not read anything in any, maybe I missed it. A number has been quoted about tank thickness. I didn't see anything in the plan that stated tank thickness. There was a question raised by one of the consultants about mounting the tanks. I haven't seen anything that really talks about the tank mountings. The question of standards is one that has concerned me for like a couple of days because I've read everything out there on standards. One of the consultants, Mr. Lavengood, suggested that we not use NFPA 58 from 95, but rather adapt the 2011 standards. I'd like to know, and you don't have to answer it now, I'd like to know why you chose the 1995 standards rather than the 2011 standards. One assumes that the standards are better in 2011 than they were in 1995. That the standards, those are your industry standards. So if you adopt the new ones, I want to know why. It doesn't make any difference to me what the state standard is, as long as our standards are higher than theirs. That's the first point. I also read that there are other standards that are applied to propane facilities, sometimes different kinds of propane facilities, the API 2510 standards. And this, in a lot of spacing and orientation, those standards are very different than the standards you chose to use. Now, I understand that those standards are used more for processing facilities than they are for bulk storage facilities. But they do state in the EPA documents, other documents, that they can be used for bulk storage facilities. Those standards, for example, they separate sets of tanks by 50 feet. I don't know what the set aside is here. The spacing between the tanks is greater. They don't basically allow the longitudinal access, if you'll hold that up, the longitudinal access to point at other facilities or other activities. They're very careful about that because that might be a source of a spark or a conflagration of some kind, particularly in a situation. And when I look at what we have here, it's a very, very tight site. I'm concerned about, for example, the turning radius of the vehicles within the site, the proximity. If you look at the proximity of the truck loading facilities to the tanks, the proximity of the truck loading facilities to the rail cars, the proximity of the whole facility to the train line, the turning radiuses on the site. There's a million detailed questions, but the underlying question is, why should we accept this particular set of standards that you proposed?
One of the reasons is your regulations specify that we have to meet the NFPA standards. Your regulations specify that we have to meet the NFPA standards. It's either in 1050 or 1051 of your regulations. And as far as the turning radii and all that you were talking about, those were all checked by, particularly by your fire department and fire marshal. Because they also had that concern, and they said that it meets their requirements for a turning radius. And one more thing, and I'll ask that Doug and Mr. Lavengood correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is the state has adopted NFPA 58 for 1995, and we are required to use that to meet the state standards. However, the more updated standards are desirable, and so it is Global's custom, and it is a requirement of the fire department that we actually meet the updated standards also. But what we have to state in a lot of our written work is that we meet the 1995 standard because that's what the state wants to see, which I can only agree is a confusing set of circumstances, but I believe I have stated that correctly.
Alan, I just want to point out that you referred to some EPA guidelines And you need to share that with the full commission at some point prior to this public hearing being closed. Because it's not anything that all of us have necessarily looked at or should have looked at. So whatever it is that you're utilizing to form any kind of question or opinion, you need to submit to the entire commission.
Well, it was the basis of, I read, and that was the basis of the question that I asked. And I have a copy of those, of that particular report. Which I
Well, you don't have to do it this moment, but you can give it to our clerk, and she can circulate it among all the members. Any other questions? Alan or anybody else? Thank you very much. Are there speakers from Global? I've heard the attorneys, are there speakers from Global who can answer some questions? Okay. I understand you have put one of these plants in Albany recently, last year, I believe, in 2013.
Correct.
Okay, and that was initially 540,000 gallons.
That is also correct.
And what is the capacity of that plant today?
1 million gallons.
Okay, so very quickly you went from 540,000 to 1 million gallons. Is that correct?
Correct.
And what do you expect the future of this facility to be, and how quickly might it grow?
I honestly have no idea. We modeled it and have submitted an application for 540,000 gallons. As Diane has said, any speculation about future expansion would end us up right back in a hearing like this, where everybody would be able to weigh in. It's not currently planned for expansion. Anybody who's seen our plan would understand that it's actually quite constrained. So the ability to expand in the fashion that you're speculating about would be difficult, if not impossible. But if we were to try to expand, we'd have to come in front of this commission. It's not currently contemplated. That's not the size of the business that we're anticipating for the facility to foresee in the future.
And the size of the truck cars that come and go, how many gallons are in each one of those? Is that 10,000?
Approximately 30,000 gallons.
30,000 each one of those?
Correct.
20 a day, 30,000?
No. I'm sorry, 10,000.
That's what I thought.
The rail cars are 30,000.
The rail cars are 30, so that's 200.
For the record, Mr. Rumley needs to say who it is.
I'm sorry.
Dylan Remley, Deputy General Counsel for Global Partners.
Good, thank you. So that's 200,000 gallons at peak day that you'd probably be taking out of the place, which means you probably have to replenish at a similar rate.
Correct.
That's about the way the business works.
Correct.
Okay. All right. I think you've answered that question. I guess one of the questions that I would ask, perhaps of our council is, once if indeed we said yes to 540,000, how difficult is it for us to say we don't want more? I mean, 540,000 is, once the camel's nose is in the tent.
Well, I could submit the question to council if you really want me to, but it seems to me it would be another special exception when we go through a process like this.
Right. But, once you agree what we're going to do, and then, if they did want to expand it, how difficult would that be?
The problem, Mr. Carr, is that we don't have that issue before us.
Right. So I'm just trying to anticipate what, how that might be, what that issue might be.
It would be a similar application to this one, another special exception.
Now, again, I think one of
I see
the...
council nodding his head.
Yes, the record can reflect that I'm nodding my head. You are correct.
We want that for the record, too.
And back to the safety experts, one of the things that we got from Mr. Duska was some question about provisioning for fire prevention or mitigation around the rail cars. It seemed that he didn't see that in some of his, so I guess the question I would have is, as far as the rail, the description of fire protection that is for the rails, is there a fire suppression plan for that?
I don't like my friends to get off
So
Firstly, there isn't one that is required by state regulations. At the site, there is to be 2 fixed monitors, which is essentially like a water gun, like a fire hose water gun, that at this stage could be turned around potentially to be used on the rail spur. They will be set up to be faced mostly at the bulk plant, but that is something that obviously before the construction goes to detailed design would be discussed with the department, so they're happy with the firefighting strategy on site. Oh.
And educate me on propane. Can you?
Excuse me, I think your expert was also looking to...
Okay.
Just very briefly, I too was concerned about the rail cars, and in my conversation with Brian, we discussed the fact that he has a blue spark can. And so he can locate these wherever he wants them, set them down, point them at the rail car, the tanks, or whatever. I like the Blitzfire, I'm comfortable with that, and because I can put it wherever I want it, I can get upwind and point it where I want it. He does have that equipment now, so he can point it at the rail car, he can point it at the tank.
Could I ask that you just identify who Brian is?
That's my assistant, fire chief, right?
Correct, sorry.
So that is equipment that the town has to provide? Is that what I'm understanding here?
The town presently has that equipment.
But it's not on site. It's something that would have to be brought on site in case of an event.
Correct.
So there's nothing, the rail cars right now on site that...
That's correct. So the monitor guns that will be on site, the monitor guns that will be fixed on the site, and I say fixed, but they will be there on the site. They can be potentially moved depending on how they're deployed. Will be able to be turned around at the rail spur. So, and that is a line that will be hooked in to water supply at the site, and will be activated via a main valve on it. To be determined location, but likely on the edge of the property that you could implement on site.
That's correct. Is they trained?
That's correct.
Yeah, a little bit about propane. Maybe I should know this, but I don't. Can you be asphyxiated by propane if it gets loose? I mean, can somebody be overwhelmed by it? One of his workers is supposed to push the button. The propane. Yes.
Propane
is non-toxic, it doesn't dissolve in water, it will displace air. So if you have a 50% propane and 50% air, you've now only got 10% oxygen. Yes, so that would be the way in an asphyxiation mode.
Have people been asphyxiated by propane?
Not to my knowledge, they probably have, but it'd be in a confined space or something. I don't know. I have no direct knowledge of that. It is, however, possible.
May I add something to that? Propane does dissipate very quickly in air, and you would have to be, it's within a few feet of a leak source that it becomes a non-asphyxiant in that way. So usually when you talk about asphyxiants, you talk about something like nitrogen and it needs to be in a floated area because of the nature, the quick evaporation and the very rapid mixing with air. Within a few feet of a leak source is non-dangerous for asphyxiation.
Okay, and there were some questions about the age of the rail cars that some people asked. To give you some idea of how long, what's the life of a rail car, and how do you retire them, and when do you retire them?
Let me go a different way and start with the life of the tank. I recently installed a new propane tank in Massachusetts. It was built in 1960. 1960, and it is as good as new, or better. They reduced the safety margins in 1972, I think it was. It used to be a safety factor 4, now it's a safety factor 3.5. So if you got a tank before 72 or so, it's actually thicker than the ones now. so therefore stronger, non-corrosive, and so on. So the tanks are, the trucks, somebody talked about the trucks earlier, I think the correct number is 5 years, that the trucks are required to be recertified by DOT. So they're brought in and pressure tested, I believe it's every 5 years, if I'm wrong it's 7, but it's something like that, at least 5. The railroad cars are covered by DOT also. And they too are periodically pressure tested in order to stay in service. And the stamp is on, if you go up on the dome, on the top of it, it's stamped into the metal when this thing was serviced and inspected. I believe that's 5 years also. Again, that's, could be 7, but it's something like that.
I think I know how you'll answer this. Just one more question. I think I know how you'll answer this question. But if you had a home on Knollwood and they wanted to build this in your backyard, how would you feel about that? Do you think that would be okay?
He says yes.
You're not going to get what you want. I live in Springfield, Massachusetts. When I live here tonight, I'm driving home. I'm exposed to risk as I drive home tonight. I think you have a propane plant here in town already. The risk to me would be lower if I unrolled my sleeping bag and slept underneath the tank that you have now, rather than driving home. Not my backyard is a whole different issue. You're asking me safety.
No, I'm also asking about property values and all sorts of things.
I've heard statements without validation on property values. I've seen other places where they did actually hire somebody to go investigate this, and it was not, that was in Guilford actually, and they found it was not significant. So I don't know. These are not issues I have any expertise in.
Discussion after the hearing was over. There are a couple of things that we had asked for, and I don't see those from the paperwork, and forgive me if I missed something. I think we talked about finding out specifically about property values in facilities that Global has had, which are similar in terms of our setup here. I know that their facility in Albany and the facility in Westboro has a lot of expansive non-residential around it, and forest, I believe, in Westboro, so it wouldn't be appropriate to compare it. But I know we discussed that at our last public hearing meeting. We wanted to know something about property values in facilities where you are located that are as adjacent or as close to residential properties. And I believe we requested that information.
Either your general counsel or Attorney Whitney, if you want to address that.
Sure, I think we did, you did ask us that at the end of the hearing. I think to speculate on something that complicated with a multitude of factors would be something that we're not willing to do. Property values go up and down on a multitude of things at multiple points of time. This facility that we're proposing is on an industrial facility that's been existing there for decades. So what impact that's had on property values, houses that were situated there when it was already a functioning facility, 400 people going in and out, 40 trucks a day, rail cars coming in, and then try to put that against the facility that we're proposing in some hypothetical. It doesn't seem like an exercise that would be that fruitful. I will point out that at 2 of our facilities in Massachusetts, there's luxury condominiums going in right down the street, and one of them in Revere, Mass. is close to one of the large casinos that's being proposed for Boston. Doesn't seem to be slowing down either of those developments. That's pure, just 2 examples that are being given, and again, to speculate about what impact it would have or not have isn't something I think is a useful exercise for us to go through. It's a zone property. It's had a large industrial facility there, again, for decades, with an existing propane storage tank.
Well, I wasn't talking about, speculation. I was talking about other facilities that you put into existence in residential neighborhoods. That was the kind of information I was looking for to find out. But I also want to ask another question, and that is, we also at the meeting, I believe, and I believe I was one of the people that mentioned it, is that when we talked about the traffic study, we were really looking for information, not just on the immediate traffic study, and if I read this, I'm sorry, I can't pull out the right paper right now, the traffic study's done to 2016, which is only 2 years from now. The request, and I remember making it in, and I don't have the minutes from the last meeting in front of me, that the traffic study going forward, just to say in 2016 we opened the facility, I don't know that that's enough of a traffic study for us to have proper information we need. And that's my only.
I think you'll find that most traffic engineers won't go beyond 2 years from now. You can extrapolate out from that because they do give you in this report. Excuse me, a factor to extrapolate out in years, but generally they're not willing to go out more than 2 years.
Well, I just know that we made the request and there was no indication at that time that we wouldn't get the information, so that's all I remember.
Attorney Whitney, I had a question for you. You have mentioned that the regulations with that are Clinton regulations with this 10.52.2.3 do not coincide with federal regulations for times of delivery off the rail site. There was concern about the noise impact of the uncoupling and coupling of the rail cars. What is the time that would coincide with federal regulations?
Actually, no time. The problem is that is all, excuse me, that's all regulated by federal rail law, and no other entity, no state, no municipality can put any requirements on rail delivery that interferes with its operation. And a specification of delivery times is considered something that would interfere with its operation. So that's the problem, that we can't specify when, or the town can't specify when the deliveries will happen. As it turns out, neither can Global. The railroad will tell us when the deliveries happen.
I have a question about the traffic study, if there's some comments on that.
There is, I apologize, but the expert that put together the traffic study can address your question as well, ma'am. Just real quickly, and then yours as well, sir.
He could probably answer both of them, actually. At the previous meeting, there was a city official, I believe, who spoke as an expert about some of the off-site dangers of an accident happening. He commented about, if somebody was texting, there's more likelihood that would cause an incident with a vehicle. And so among the questions that I brought up was that we needed to see what the westbound maneuver was coming out of Noble Drive so that we could see if we could make that turn. And it appears that your turning radius supports what Ms. McCullum, I think, McCullum commented on tonight. We asked the question because we wanted to know if that was a safe maneuver, and it seems like your report is corroborating what she's witnessed, where they're turning around at the shopping plaza across the street. So my question is should we be doing something to make that a safer maneuver? Yes.
For the record, my name is Scott Thornton. I'm a registered professional engineer with Vanessa Associates. And I'll take your question first, ma'am. The state requirement for traffic impact studies is a 2-year requirement. Basically accounts for existing conditions and then a 2-year horizon, which gets you to the facility's opening year. We can certainly go out longer if, go out 5 years, if that would be helpful to you. Honestly, I don't know that it would show much difference because when we're looking at conditions projected, whether it's a 2-year or a 5-year horizon, you're still adding a small increment of traffic associated with the site because the site doesn't generate a large amount of traffic during the peak hours. So whether it's a 2-year horizon or a 5-year horizon, we don't think that there would be a lot of effects to be noticed by or that would be the result of the project. So, sir, your question. Related to the vehicles turning in and out of Norwood Drive, the exhibit that we prepared does show that the tractor trailer entering Norwood Drive and the eastbound left turn movement can make that movement without encroaching into the across the travel lane for movements exiting Norwood Drive. The right turning tractor trailer coming out of Norwood Drive would have to go over the double yellow center line for Norwood to come into the center of the intersection and then exit to the right to continue back down to get to continue west. But it's important to note that when that truck is coming out of the site, it's a side, there's basically a 3-phase signal operation at that intersection. So there's going to be traffic on the side streets only. So what's coming out of the job lot and what's coming out of Norwood Drive. So trucks, the trucks are likely to yield to the cars coming out. You're not talking about a large number of trucks. You're talking about a truck maybe every, or maybe 6 minutes between trucks, maybe 12 minutes between trucks on average, because it's not a large volume of trucks associated with this site. That answers your question.
I'll never get
Just for the record, I think that the whole point of requesting that exercise was kind of what you showed us and what the public has told us, and we're still thinking that's a concern. So what I would like to hear is that a safer intersection would include additional signage or restraightening the stop bar on Main Street Park. My point is you documented what we're concerned about, but you didn't propose anything to remedy the situation.
back to Massachusetts.
Further questions from the commission, or any additional questions from the commission?
No, I don't.
So I have an exhibit, should I face the?
You should face us.
Okay. I have an exhibit that was part of the traffic study, and basically what it shows is trucks that are exiting, and to your point, trucks that are exiting out of Norwood Drive, making the right turn. There's a slight encroachment or crossing of the yellow line to get across, to come into the intersection. But you can see that on your figure, the swept path of the vehicle doesn't cross over onto the yellow line for West Main Street. So that shows that you wouldn't be any need to restrict or to make any modifications to the intersection. I don't doubt that, and this is for the type of vehicle that's going in and out of the propane facility. If there are, I know that there was a moving facility that was located on Norwood Drive. Those are larger vehicles. We're not talking about that size vehicle. There's a tractor trailer going into the electric car business. If that operator is trying to get to this facility and he doesn't, he's coming from the west, it's going to be pretty tough for him to make a U-turn maneuver to get in there. So I could absolutely see him making a right turn into the Ocean State job lot and then coming back around and then continuing. I wasn't there when the trucks were making movements into Ocean State to then continue across. I don't doubt that does happen. But the fact is that for these size trucks to go to the facility, there's no need for them to do that.
The trucks will only be going towards Madison from what you're proposing. You're not suggesting that they're going to be heading east through Clinton to another state.
Yeah, that's correct. It's a regional distribution facility, so the easiest way for them to get back out to 95 is to head to the west.
Thank you. That's what I've been saying.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, in your traffic study, suggested to the attorney, in the traffic study, they already have recommendations. So, page 2. It's what you asked.
Send them back to Massachusetts.
Here, here's what
There are recommendations in the plan,
You gotta pick up the
and this, I don't know if I did it before, we just got the plan today, so it's new to us too. There are recommendations. And we are perfectly happy to make all the changes that are recommended. For those of you who have the plan, they're on the bottom of page 2. And we're happy to facilitate making those plans. I'm sorry, those changes.
While you're out there, Attorney Whitney, I have what amounts to a legal question. We've talked about this fence, and you cited, I believe you cited, some state regulation code or what have you, that you maintain is in conflict with our own regulations. I specifically asked that question of our counsel, and he's here tonight, and the answer, I think I understand, is we decide whether there's a conflict because there's none apparent directly to him, to Attorney Slater. Is that correct?
What I've suggested is, especially not on the rail side I think is very easy. On the state side, for example, on the height of the fence,
Exactly
the
that
applicant needs
point.
to demonstrate whether or not that 14-foot fence is actually in conflict with a state regulation or federal regulation.
That's my
Present
point.
that,
I'm not seeing anything directly in conflict, and if that's the case, you're asking us to waive it, and we can't because of Mackenzie. And if we can't, well, if we can't waive it, and we're relying on counsel's opinion, as we should, he's our counsel. If we can't waive it, the only two alternatives I see, well, there's three alternatives. You build a 14-foot opaque fence as opposed to a 6-foot clear fence, or chain link fence, I guess that's what it is. Or the other two alternatives are, you need to apply to the zoning board of appeals for a variance, and they're empowered to give you one if they so choose after testimony. Or you propose an amendment to our regulations, which has to go through the normal route. So I want to know what specifically do you quote as a section in state statute, regulations, or code that directly conflicts with our regulation? I mean, it may be a good idea to have a 6-foot fence as opposed to 14 feet, but I don't want to run afoul of our regulations and/or Mackenzie.
I appreciate that, and it takes a little unpacking, but I don't think we have a problem. There are two dimensions we're talking about, the height of the fence and whether you can see through it. We're happy to put up a 14-foot fence. That's not a problem. The state regulations require a minimum of a 6-foot fence, but it can be 14 feet. So the height is not a problem at all. The problem is being able to see through it. And I don't have the section of the regulation that I can quote to you right here now, but I believe that I've quoted it to Attorney Slater, and I think you'll find that he agrees that since your regulations require that we comply with the NFPA, and the NFPA requires that it be a fence you can see through, and the state has adopted the NFPA as the regulations that apply to this site, I think it is within your authority to decide that that particular element of your regulations is
Defer to the state.
Yeah, exactly.
So we wouldn't be waiving it.
No, you would not be waiving it. You would say the state takes preeminence in that particular regard, and so it has to be a fence you can see through. The 14 feet, we don't have a problem with. And to be honest, in the long run, I think you probably will want to change your regulations a little bit. But I don't think that you need to do it in order to approve this particular application.
But we need to find a conflict in order to solve what you call the conflict between the opaque fence that we require and the clear see-through fence that you propose.
But there is such a conflict, and I can get you the part of the regulation that says that. And it's state law, it's NFPA law, and in fact, we can't comply with your requirement that we comply with the NFPA and have an opaque fence there.
Well, let me ask Attorney Slater, is that so?
I believe that is, and part of my expectation of what was going to be submitted would be a specific reference to that regulation. And looking at a number, I believe the opacity, that it be opaque, that is state law and federal standard. So to that, what I can't cite to you, and I think you should have it in the record, is exactly what you said, which is the specific site. So you have that in the record. I believe that is the case. The 14 foot, I expected there might not be a conflict, so that, as Attorney Whitney said, they can comply with the town's regulation in terms of height. But I believe there is a direct conflict in terms of whether it can remain opaque, which is what the regulations would say, and what some state and federal law would say. In which case, it's not a waiver, it's a preemption issue. So that as long as that site can be provided in the record, and the commission has as a matter of its record, if there's a conflict in terms of the opaque fence, that it can, right, exactly, that it has to be see-through, then your commission can, in fact, has to defer to state and federal law.
That was the conclusion I drew from your argument, but I wasn't sure if there was an actual site that you could provide to us for the record so that we can make that finding.
We will certainly do that. I have had it before, I just don't have it with me right now. I think you'll also find that the fire department feels pretty strongly that they want to be able to see through the fence.
On that point, do we have the assistant chief here?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Manware?
Yes.
Would you like to come here and assist us in some of this information? And
It is the standing of the fire department that we would like to be able to see through the fence. The matter on the height of the fence is not a concern of ours.
Okay, you would like to see through it?
Yes.
Okay. Is there any other question from the commission to the assistant fire chief that you might want to ask?
Fire marshal is also there.
Not here? When we talked about the water flow capacity issues, would you like to assist us in that information? The report I saw from Mr. Lavingwood talked about 10,000 to 18,000 gallons availability. That seems extravagantly high. And then in Attorney Whitney's letter, it was pointed out that that was probably a typo. What is your understanding?
It's my understanding from speaking with Mr. Lavingwood that the requirement minimum flow would be 1,138 gallons a minute. We flow tested that hydrant at 9:35 this morning, and it far exceeds that. We flowed 1,300 gallons a minute for 10 minutes, and I know it.
Is there an issue about having, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but is there an issue about having a second hydrant possibility so you could have a greater availability of flow in the event of a...
That was only a request if the minimum standard was not being met.
Only if the minimum standard cannot be met?
Correct.
Would it be preferable to have something in addition to that, in your opinion?
We don't have any specific preference, and we cannot formulate an opinion for you on the matter.
Any other questions from the commission members?
under our regulations, this seems to be just related to these kinds of hazardous commercial oil, propane, or gasoline storage. Are these hours of transport materials 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday through Friday, except in the case of emergency? And what we're told is that because deliveries are going to be made by rail, that's out of the applicant's control or our control. I guess the question is, I mean, I think the rules were made, the manufacturing that was there before got things delivered by rail at all hours, but it wasn't propane. And I think that's the concern, is that one of the reasons this was put in here was because if, heaven forbid you have some problem, that it happens, during certain hours of the day when people are alert and able to deal with it and cope with it. So I'm not sure that we should say because it's by rail that it's okay that it comes other times. Our regulations, as I read them, don't permit that. And I don't know whether we want council's opinion on that, or if you want to discuss that, perhaps we'll make a decision. But it can seem to me to be a conflict that can't be resolved.
Well, as a matter of fact, that was one of the points made in the intervener's brief, I believe. And the point was, only under emergency could we allow more than 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. I don't know if you're asking a legal question necessarily. I think the point, as I understand it, that's been made by Attorney Whitney, is that is due to the fact that the railroad is going to make deliveries whenever they see fit to make deliveries, and we don't have anything to say about that. If I'm incorrectly interpreting your question, are you saying that that's okay for them to deliver on the 6th day because we can't do anything about the railroad or the federal statutes? Or are you saying they can't have trucks come out on the 6th day and take the propane out of the facility?
I guess what I'm saying is if they're not in control of what hours the rail delivers, then they're in conflict with our regulations, which say that they can be delivered except during these hours. And they're not in control of it, they can't do anything about it. So it seems to me that we have a conflict that is unresolved.
Except that from what I understand from our council's opinion, we have to defer to the federal government on that issue.
Well, I guess the thing is I think we don't have to. I think we can, that's one of the reasons we might deny this, because if they cannot comply with our regulations.
Mr. Slater, maybe you can address it better than...
I think you're right. There's a couple of layers here, and one I think is very clear, and that is an ordinance, a regulation that attempts to limit the hours of operation is preempted in conflict with federal law and the supremacy clause. So there are actually cases in which there's a whole regulatory process where an ordinary applicant would have to come before a local agency, get environmental approvals, get zoning type approvals, and the railroad facility doesn't have to do anything because of this federal law. Now, the global is here, so they are subject, they recognize that their operation in general is subject to your zoning regulations. You have to take as a given that one limitation that you can't place on issuing an approval, or one part of your regulation that you can't enforce, is the hours of operation of the rail travel. Now you have to take that as a given as part of the use. The use that's being proposed, they're telling you how many, the trucks, when the trucks are going to go out, what the tanks are like, what the operation is like. You have to take as a given, for the purpose of evaluating your special exception standards, the fact that the rail traffic can come at any time. You can't tell them otherwise, and you can't limit it. It's just the federal government has spoken on that. There's both not only clear in the statute, but also in the case law. But the facility in general, they're not claiming that there is an outright exemption. There have been instances in which private facilities have tried to say they're not subject to the local control of any sort. That's obviously not the position they're taking. It's just they have said, and we can't change the fact that the rail cars can come in at any time. Does that answer your question?
Well, maybe not. Are you saying then that because this is a special exception, because we are insisting on this hourly operation and daily operation, and the rail will deliver when they will deliver, we can simply say, well, because you can't meet our regulations, we can deny the special exception? Is that what you're saying?
No, I am not. In fact, I think that would be run directly afoul of federal law.
So I understood it correctly in the first place, and Mr. Carr may not.
No, I'm trying to see if that is the answer to my question. If this would not be a showstopper, that the federal law preempts us from holding them to that or from denying them.
Exactly, or by putting a condition of approval that tweaks it a little
I
bit.
understand your condition of approval, we can't make a condition of approval. What I'm saying is can we deny on the basis that they can't control that? And I think you're saying you can't.
That's what I'm saying, yes.
On that basis, not any other.
We can deny on other basis, but not on that basis.
Not, right. Failure to comply with that section of the regulation is not a basis.
All right, I am going to have to ask for a motion to continue this public hearing to next month, because we have 2 or 3 other matters that we need to attend to, and this could just go on for another hour or so. Any discussion?